only for war. Thousands of square miles are nothing but sand and stone. A compass is as necessary, once off the road, as it is to a sailor at sea. Water doesn't exist until you bore deep into the earth. You bath in your shaving mug. Flies have the tenacity of bulldogs. Biggest principal city. Alexandria, Egypt's chief port and base of our Mediterranean fleet. And Suez, gateway to the Far East. All these must have seemed dazzlingly near. As near as a mirror. And as it proved, as much an illusion. On this 40-mile front, General Auchinleck took personal command. His the total responsibility. Not another yard back where we go. His much depleted army ducked, blasted, and wired its standing, and laid protected lines. Our front was one of discontinuous sets of minefields with trolley points and machine gun and anti-tank gun emplacements. But it was as yet extremely splendid. Here, General Auchinleck waited. And with him, men who had fought at Gazala and Sidi Rezek. Others who had been twice to Benghazi. Others who had escaped from Bir Hakeim and Tobruk. The 8th Army had made a fighting retreat for 100 miles.
He became a legend almost overnight.
After several days of attack and counterattack, the British, Australians, English, and South Africans worked very well, fighting and dogging the Thai infantry at Waterloo. The immediate crisis was past. The anxiety remained. Dramatic of all, he brought new commanders, General Alexander and General Montgomery. Alexander, one of the last men out of Dunkirk, and whose small army withstood the Japanese the whole length of Burma, and Montgomery, who took over the 8th Army. A man who lived as sternly as a Cromwell, and who is as much a part of his modern Ironside. The machinery of war poured from the factory. And British women worked alongside men on the shells, the ships, the tanks, the aircraft, the explosives. In no country are women so thoroughly organized for war. the jungle. On this route, fly aircraft brought by ship to ports on the west coast have been intercepted. The West had its own problems, among them malaria. Behind the line, great reinforcement. In the line, Rommel had come for us again. It was 2 months later. He told his troops that on this day they were going to Cairo. But 5 days afterwards, he withdrew. He left nearly 300 tanks behind to prove his generalship. In 2 or 3 months, we recreated and greatly enlarged the 8th Army. Into Middle East ports came men from the United Kingdom, India, and South Africa. The 44th Home Counties Division and the 51st Highlands Division had actually left Britain in May and June. And it was at the time to Bruxelles that President Roosevelt, who had Mr. Churchill with him at the time, ordered the first Sherman tank to Egypt. Long-range planning was yielding its reward. The Air Force kept guard. Rommel, with a supply line 1/10 the length of ours, was himself building up his supplies as hard as he could go. But for a considerable proportion of them, there was no future. Our United Air Forces saw to that. The Royal Navy and Fleet Air Arm also were busy destroying Rommel's convoys. Within a few weeks, our Mediterranean submarines sank or damaged 24 enemy ships. In August alone, of all that was shipped to him, 80% went to the bottom.
One of the biggest battle-winning factors in war. When two first-class fighters meet, He who sticks it longest wins in the end. This has been proved time and time again, and applies to all ranks, from general officers to private soldiers. And this includes all branches of the army, whatever their job and wherever they be. Fighting fit and fit to fight.
Rommel was full of confidence. He was saying to journalists in Berlin, "You may rely on our holding fast to what we have got. We hold the gateway to Egypt with the full intention to act."
Man kann sich auch verlassen. Was wir haben, halten wir fest.
Hitler was experiencing one of his historic intuitions. He saw before him the destined conqueror of Egypt, and on him he bestowed the baton of field marshal. Rommel hoped that if we attacked first, we should strike at his center. That hope we deliberately encouraged by the disposition of our forces. Having allowed our armor to break through, he saw himself destroying it by attacks from both ranks. That done, his own offensive would be lost. General Alexander, Admiral Harwood, and Air Marshal Cheddar planned Alamein together. It was to be a joint operation. Unity of command had become a reality. In the desert itself, General Montgomery and Air Vice Marshal Cunningham lived cheek by jowl. There was no divided command, said General Montgomery. There was only one command. General Montgomery, realizing that a citizen army fights best when it knows exactly what's going on and what it is going to do, saw to it that the plan of battle was known to everybody, from general to private soldier. And it came down from one rank to another till the chain was complete. So that senior officers fighting in their third desert winter shared the knowledge with troopers going into action for the first time. The battle was against fixed lines. And against fixed lines, General Alexander said, the tactics are just like breaking down a wall with a crowbar. You drive it in as far as possible, and then lever this way and that to make a small hole. Then you enlarge it. As soon as you have made a hole large enough, your armored divisions go through to wreck the enemy's artillery and lines of communication. As for General Montgomery, he said his intention was to hit the enemy for six right out of Africa. The final preparations began. now that all knew what was to be done, and all was made ready, there were final moments of normal desert life. Of rest, of washing clothes, of a swim in the sea for those near the coast, of cooking the evening meal. The coming of dawn over the Mediterranean, the sunset with a touch of green in the horizon, the mirage turning sand into water and sprinkling that water with the sails of smaller ships. Many a surveyor saw these things, perhaps for the first time, and he wrote his letters home, smoked, and talked things over, or lay silent as he listened to the sight of the same island head. The Battle of Alamein began in the evening. As light failed, the final moves were made. The Western Desert is a place fit only for war. Thousands of square miles are nothing but sand and stone. A compass is as necessary once off the road as it is to a sailor at sea. Water can be distant in the fall deep into the river. The bar is your shaving rod. Flies have the history of wood. Roses ready to turn to desert storms. Days of early hot can be followed by nights of bitter cold. When the hot Caspian wind brings its sandstorms, life can be intolerable. The Arabs say that after 5 days of it, murder can be excused. The tide of this war in the desert has ebbed and flowed, but as Rommel advanced after we lost the book, never had our backs been so cracked as during the war. We have lost 80,000 men and much wounded. On which General Black might have been run here on Nelson True, for example. But he was deliberately falling back on Alamein, no more than 60 miles from Alexandria. To Rommel, advancing a considerable speed, Egypt, with an Nile Delta which gives his life. Cairo, British General Headquarters, and Africa's principal city. Alexandria, Egypt's chief port, and most of our Mediterranean fleet. And still, gateway to the Far East. All of these must have seemed definitely near as a mirage, and as a proof, as much an illusion. It was a wise decision of General Auchinleck to come back to Alamein, much the strongest natural line of defense between the Libyan frontier and the Delta. Moreover, Rommel's lines of supply were here stretched to the limit. On the right, our flank rested on the sea. On the left, it approached the Qatar Depression, a trough the size of Wales, one-third of its salt marsh, and all of its territories that no vehicle could cross. On this 40-mile front, General Auchinleck took personal command. His the total responsibility. Not another yard back were we going. His much depleted army ducked, blasted, and wired its own in, and laid protective lines. Our front was one of discontinuous sets of minefields with strong points, and machine gun and anti-tank gun emplacements. But it was as yet extremely splendid. Here, General Auchinleck waited. And with him, men who had fought at Zara in City Rosing. Others who had been twice to Benghazi. Others who had escaped from the Hakim to Brooklyn. The 8th Army had made a fighting retreat of 400 miles. In a battle which approached in its importance the Battle of Britain was now at hand. The Middle East, Suez, and infinitely more were at stake. The crucial days had come. After 7 days of attack and counterattack, the British, Australians, Indians, and South Africans were still there, fighting as dogged as our infantry at Waterloo. The immediate crisis was past, but anxiety remained. Into this situation stepped Mr. Churchill, bringing his own inspiration and vigor. He brought good news, a reinforcement for the invasion supplies which had already rounded the Cape. For 5 days he visited the army and air force, explaining the task and its importance. And most dramatic of all, he brought new commanders, General Alexander and General Montgomery. Alexander, one of the last men out of Dunkirk, and the small army which took the Japanese the whole length of Burma, and Montgomery, who took over the 8th Army. And then there is the general recovery, and all this much apart is modern Ironsides. Follow up weapons faster than you can do them. At home in Britain, the machinery of war poured from the factory. And British women worked alongside men on the shells, the ships, the tanks, the aircraft, the explosives. In no country are women so thoroughly organized for war. miles managed by U-boats, which nothing but the resolution of our massive seamen, naval guard over them, have kept open. And the second by air across the middle of Africa, over the Niger, and then north along the Nile Delta. Landing grounds have been tapped from the center. On this route, flyers are brought by ships to port from the west coast and their ancestors. The West Indian home province are London and Liverpool. Behind the line, great reinforcements. In the line, Rommel had counted us again, with 2 months later. He told his troops that on this day they were going to Cairo. But 5 days afterwards, he withdrew. He left nearly 300 tanks behind to prove his generalship. We recreated and greatly enlarged the army. In the Middle East force came men from the United Kingdom, India, and South Africa. The 44th Home Counties Division and the 53rd Pilots Division had actually enlisted Britain in May and June. And it was a surprise to Bruxelles that President Roosevelt, who had Mr. Churchill with him at the time, ordered the first German tanks to Egypt. Long-range planning was yielding its reward. The Air Force kept guard. Rommel, with a supply line 1/10 the length of ours, was himself building up his supplies as hard as he could go. But for a considerable proportion of them, there was no future. Our United Air Force saw to that. The Royal Navy and Fleet Air Arm also were busy destroying Rommel's convoy. Within a few weeks, our Mediterranean submarines sank or damaged 24 enemy ships. In August alone, of all that were shipped to him, 80% went to the bottom.
Hardness of an army is one of the biggest battle-winning factors in war. When 2 first-class fighters meet, he who spits his longest wins in the end. This has been proved time and time again, and applies to all ranks, from general officers to private soldiers. And this includes all branches of the army, whatever their job and wherever they be. Fighting fit and fit to fight. the middle of October, preparations on both sides were nearing completion.
In the north, Rommel's forces stretched from the coast to a point 10 miles inland. There were the bulk of his German infantry, comprising the 90th Light and the 164th Division, together with the Italian Trieste Division. In the south, holding a front of 14 miles, were 3 Italian divisions. These were strengthened by the rest of his German infantry. The center was left deliberately weak, held by a single Italian division, the Bologna, holding a front of 16 miles. Behind the infantry in the north were 2 armored divisions, 1 German and 1 Italian, and similarly in the south. The British line began in the north with the 9th Australians, and below them the 1st South Africans. The 51st Highland Division, who had some batteries to avenge, and the 4th Indian Division, veterans of Abyssinia and the Western Desert, held the center. In the south were the 50th Division from the Tees and Tyne, with the fighting French of Bir Hakeim and contingents of Greeks. The tactical reserve was found by the 44th Division from counties close to London. Our armored divisions were 3, all United Kingdom men. Some veterans of a score of desert battles are relatively new to the West. One division, the famous 7th, held his true south. The other 2 were in close support in the north, with the 2nd New Zealand Infantry Division alongside. Rommel was full of confidence. He was saying to journalists in Berlin, "You may rely on our holding fast to what we have done. We hold the gateway to Egypt with the full intention of handing it out."
Unser Land wieder vorwärts zu lassen. Man kann sich auch verlassen, was wir haben, halten wir fest.
Hitler was experiencing one of his historic intuitions. He saw before him the destined conqueror of Egypt, and on him he bestowed the baton of field marshal. Rommel hoped that if we attack first, we should strike at his center. That hope we deliberately encouraged by the disposition of our forces. Having allowed our armor to break through, he saw himself destroying it by attacks from both flanks. That done, his own offensive would be launched. General Alexander, Admiral Harwood, and Air Marshal Tiller planned Alamein together. It was to be a joint operation. Unity of command had become a reality. In the desert itself, General Montgomery and Air Vice Marshal Cunningham lived cheek by jowl. There was no divided command, said General Montgomery. There was only one command. General Montgomery, realizing that the citizen army had essentially knows exactly what's going on and what it is going to do, saw to it that the plan of battle was known to everybody, from general to private soldier. And it came down from one rank to another till the chain was complete. So that senior officers fighting in their 3rd desert winter shared the knowledge with troopers going into action for the first time. The battle was against 6th line. And against 6th line, General Alexander said, the tactics are just like breaking down a wall with a crowbar. You drive it in as far as possible, and then lever this way and that to make a small hole. Then you enlarge it. As soon as you have made a hole large enough, your armored divisions go through to wreck the enemy's artillery and lines of communication. As for General Montgomery, he said his intention was to hit the enemy of the 6th right out of Africa. The final preparations began. And now that all knew what was to be done, and all was made ready, there were final moments of normal desert life. The breath, the washing clothes, swimming the seas for those near the coast, or cooking for evening meals. The coming of dawn over the Mediterranean. The sunset was cut of news in the west. The mirage turned dead in the water, and twinkling network of the surface of the ship. Many of those were full of the hands from the time. And he rode his own time, and smoked, and talked things over, or lay silent as he listened to the pipe saying, "I say." The battle of Alamein began in the evening. As light failed, the final move was made. His arms watched Rommel rise, dying to life together. At 0-7, the barrage. At the same moment, the sappers were moved forward, clear gaps of the enemy minefields, marking the gaps in one space. After 30 minutes, the barrage was lifted from the first objective and increased forward. At 10 o'clock.
early morning, the first objectives were in our hands. The barrage had done its work. The guns had been heard at Alexandria, 60 miles away. The enemy had been taken partly by surprise. Our infantry was in their pajamas. But elsewhere, fighting was severe. There was a good deal of bayonet work. And now our forces moved up, consolidating and advancing further. Infantry, tanks, and airforce working as one. Fighting, the 8th Army had made a salient to the north, 6 miles wide, and to a depth 4 miles beyond the first enemy minefield. Next day, attacks were made in the center and south. The attacks that Rommel had been expecting, and which he thought was a real thing, but they were merely diversions. In fact, our main attack was to be in the north. The 8th Army's crowbar had been driven in, and was being levered this way and that. In our second, the Australians were attacking again and secured a 3-mile front running westward. Counterattacks repeatedly during these days, both on the ground and in the air. Became a place of deadly terror, and the machines that escaped us there were destroyed on the ground. On the fourth day of the battle, Kidney Ridge was assaulted by troops of the 7th Armored Division, riflemen, light tanks, and armored cars. meantime, the Australians, backed by British tanks, were exploiting their former northward thrust and driving a wedge still further into the German forces near the sea. Days bitter work cut off large numbers of rebel infantry, some of whom, for the time being, fought on sideways. Casualties suffered largely on both sides. Large groups of prisoners were in our hands. While the battle in the north was raging, Rommel had been forced to act. We had imposed our will on him. He moved two panzer divisions, the 21st and Ariete, from the south to just below our salient. The Air Force began the task of preventing them from concentrating.